Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our November 13th session of our Spencer Virtual Campus. If you haven't been here before, our series is designed to support next-gen risk management and insurance talent, high school, college, recent graduates as well. And if we haven't met before, I'm Ken Goldstein. I am the University Partnerships Director at Spencer. I have the pleasure of overseeing our merit-based scholarship program activity that supports practical learning for students, course development, and a variety of corporate and other donor partner collaborations as well. Spencer is a 46-year-old lead non-for-profit that supports next generation risk management and insurance talent. If you haven't been here before, we would call this a relaxed, AKA chill type of environment. We want to create as much of a face-to-face experience for you as possible. And along these lines, a couple of quick housekeeping issues. First, as a professional courtesy to Philly, to Kayla, who I will introduce in just a minute, and Spencer, if you have the opportunity to turn your video on, we would greatly appreciate that. That way we replicate as much of a face-to-face classroom experience as possible. We're going to encourage participation throughout the session as well. You can do it via the raise your hand feature and then audio in at the appropriate time, or alternatively, you can certainly use the general chat as well. If you're shy, you can private message me. I'll try to keep an eye on that as well and integrate it at the appropriate time for Kayla as well. And then we're going to drop some different links over the course of our session today with regard to Philly and Kayla and Spencer, so stay tuned for that in just a bit. With that, I'm going to do some quick hit introductions as well as I let some additional folks in the room at the same time. First and foremost, our spotlight speaker represents Philadelphia Insurance Companies, a member of the Tokyo Marine Group, which designs, markets, and underwrites commercial property and casualty and professional liability insurance products for select industries. They are corporately based outside of Philly, have more than 50 offices nationwide. They've been in business for over 50 years, nationally recognized as a member of Ward's Best Places to Work in Insurance and one of the healthiest 100 workplaces in America, which I think is really cool. Beyond the virtual campus piece, I wanted to say thank you to Philly for the name scholarship support. Our scholarship program is set up where about 2/3 of our partners support specific students, which means it's not just about tuition and book support and things like that, but it's about mentoring and career pathing, and we value that from Philly as well. I have an excellent speaker here today who I've had the opportunity to connect with to share her time and expertise with us around the hot topic of communicating across generations in the workplace. Kayla Gorell, Senior DEI Training Specialist, is an established corporate trainer, oversees DE&I training, mentoring, performance management, new hire orientations, and several other soft skills. And Kayla is joined by a variety of her colleagues at Philly. So we appreciate you taking the time to join Kayla as well. Kayla, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you need support as we go along, let me know. And looking forward to the conversation today.
Right. Thank you, Ken. And thanks for that great introduction for me and for Philadelphia Insurance Companies, also known as Philly. Nice to see everyone and welcome to today's session. So, as Ken said, I'm a senior DEI training specialist at Philly. And so DEI is one of the main things that I do day to day. And I'm mentioning this because I think it's particularly relevant to today's audience, as I also manage our summer intern program and get a chance to work with some of the early career talent that we have coming into the organization. So I'm really excited to be able to combine DEI with an early career audience today. So let's get started. Today's topic is communicating across generations in the workplace. One of the most noticeable differences between people in different generations is the way they communicate. And in this session, we are going to engage in a dialogue about generational diversity and how it influences communication in the workplace specifically. So, everyone, you're welcome to share your experience throughout today's session, share your thoughts, ask any questions that you have, and it really will just enrich the conversation the more voices we hear or of course utilize in the chat. So hopefully everyone is willing to participate in that way. So let us move on to what our learning objectives are for today. you are, as a participant, will be able to explain the benefits of generational diversity. We're going to get into that shortly. Be able to navigate generational stereotypes. We're going to talk about stereotypes. It is a thing. Also, hopefully you'll walk away with valuing these differences in communication. So the goal today is not to try and decide which one is better than the other, the different styles. We all have our preferences, but really see the value in the differences, and then get into some activities where we apply some of the things that we're going to go over, and hopefully you will walk away with the ability to choose suitable communication styles in various work settings. All right, so I want to get interactive right away so that everyone, feels fully engaged and connected here. So we're going to talk about what percentage of employees you think are in each generation in the US workforce. So we'll utilize the chat for this activity, and we're going to start off with the baby boomer generation. So I have the date of birth range there, and then right above the little picture, you'll see what age group that is, so you don't have to do the math, and then a couple little descriptors for each generation. So we'll start off with baby boomers who are currently 61 to 80 years old. What percentage of the US workforce do you think is comprised of baby boomers? And just type it in the chat and kind of see what everyone thinks. And it's perfectly fine if you're just taking a wild guess. All right, so see some 10s, 15s, some people in the 30s. All right. Looks like we have I'm just going to put a little line here to separate for the next one. So for Generation X, these are 45 to 60 years old, and they are referred to as Gen X. What percentage of the current workforce do you think is Gen X, is that age group? And keep track as you go. All your numbers have to add up to 100. So keep track of that. All right. So some higher numbers there, some lower. All right, moving on to Gen Y, more commonly known as millennials. So these are folks who are 29 to 46 years old. I am a millennial. And no cheating, don't Google it. I should have said that earlier, but it might be too late. I see Robert laughing. He's like, oh. And depending on what source you get, the numbers do vary slightly, but for the most part, they're pretty close if you look at different sources of that data. All right. There's some very vastly different guesses or estimations here. And then the last one, Gen Z, 13 to 28 years old. And of course, for the workforce, those would be folks, I would say probably 20 and older if they're in the workforce. So yeah, there's some Gen Zs that are still not, they're still in high school, college, of course. All right, so remember your guesses. I'm going to pull up the answers here in a moment. There we go. All right, so let's take a look at, we'll start with baby boomers. According to this result here, this data, they are currently 6% of the workforce. You might see as high as 7 or 8, but very low percentage currently for baby boomers, 6%. And then if you go to Gen X, which is the next step down as far as a younger age group, 33% Gen X. Millennials are 35%. And then Gen Z, we're going to skip over that 0%. I'll get back to that in a moment. Gen Z are 25%. And why I use this specific graphic, because there's dozens of them, out there on the internet, is that I liked how it showed in 10 years what the percentage of the workforce will be for this generation. So by 2035, there will be basically no baby boomers left in the workforce. I'm sure there'll be some outliers, but in general, it will probably be less than 1%. You'll see Gen X drop all the way down from 33 to 21. Millennials will drop to 29, and then Gen Z is going to increase, and Gen Alpha, who are currently too young to be in the workforce, so that would be like my 8-year-old and folks younger than 13, will be almost 20% of the workforce. So when Ken and I were, kind of going over the content for today's course, we were like, that's really interesting and kind of supports the approach of talking about careers and where people see themselves after school from a young age, because before you know it, they'll be making up, 20% of the workforce. So is anyone, was anyone's guesses like really close, or were you way off? Any comments or thoughts on that before we move on? Anything shocking in this? Okay, so we're going to now move on to speaking about what some of the benefits are of having multiple generations in the workforce at the same time. So in order to justify, taking the effort like you all are today to successfully navigate intergenerational communication, I think it's important to lay the foundation of like, okay, this is the reality that we're in. And it's not like, oh, we just have to learn about this because we have no choice, but there are benefits to having a multi-generational workforce. So you'll see four specific benefits here. The first one is that the workforce mirrors a diverse customer base. So in an age diverse workforce, you support market growth and reputation by ensuring that there are employees in the organization that represent the age diversity of customers. And if you think about the insurance industry, we definitely want to mirror the communities and the towns and cities and states that we operate in. So it's beneficial to have folks that might be able to more easily relate to certain age groups. And then of course, courses like this help people to be able to successfully connect with and communicate with those who are from a different generation. So there are customers that will have various needs, motivations, preferences, sensitivities to different things, priorities. Can anyone share any examples of maybe something you've personally experienced or witnessed that supports this notion that having an age diverse workforce is helpful for mirroring the customer base?
I can share.
Sure.
So I've noticed something. Hi, my name is Brian Kelly Prince. I'm also with Spencer. Hi, Ken. Thanks for
Hi, Kelly.
and hi, Kayla. I think for me, when I saw Gen Z, so I'm a millennial. When I saw Gen Z come into the workforce, it was kind of refreshing for me because I feel like there was a different way of problem solving and communicating with leadership that I think sometimes millennials were a little bit more shy to do. So it was really kind of interesting. And I definitely look up to Gen Z in that way, which, you don't always think you're going to look up to the younger
The
one.
younger, yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, sorry, Brianne. I
Yeah,
called
no,
you
it's
Kelly.
okay.
Thanks for sharing that, Brianne.
Just call me Brie. It's like the cheese, easy to remember.
Yes.
Thanks, Kayla.
Anyone else have another example or anything to share?
I can go. So my name is Travis. I'm a current junior at Michigan State University. And one opportunity I had was to work in the housing department as a marketing assistant. So we were working on like a lot of flyers that go up in the residence halls. And I think just like bringing my experience as a current student was pretty unique because I thought about a lot of the things that some of the older or maybe millennials or some of the older generations in the office didn't think about initially. So that was
Yep,
one of my experiences.
absolutely. And that's a really good example, Travis, of things that we will miss because we just aren't familiar with it, or when we were in entry-level roles or maybe in a position that you might be in, it was done a certain way. And now you're like, well, this is going to appeal to a much wider audience, or this is like a newer or more current way to do something or to reach a customer base. A great example. All right. So the next benefit that we'll touch on today is that talent is optimized. So a key benefit of a multi-generational workforce is the potential for knowledge sharing. Longer serving employees can help younger generations understand the context of an organization and ensure that industry knowledge is passed down. And it's been proven time and time again that someone can get hired in and read the employee handbook and take classes and learn all the things, but there are certain things that you're not going to find written somewhere or that are going to be explicitly available, that someone can consume, so that kind of social learning that takes place, definitely going from more experience to less experience is very critical and very important. And then younger generations can bring new ideas, like Travis just mentioned, skills and methods to the workplace and educate their coworkers on these. So very similar to the second point, there are more opportunities for, I think I kind of spoke about both of those points at the same time. But yes, when you have representation from multiple generations, it contributes now to diversity of thought in a workplace, and this supports higher quality decision making. You have less blind spots, less things being missed. And we tend, the research shows that we are better problem solvers when our ideas are challenged versus when we are in echo chambers, or we kind of get rolled into groupthink, which can be quite harmful. I could do a whole hour just on that. But we make better decisions when we have folks that are pointing out things that may not be on our radar, or things that we're not going to always think about. What are some examples of some things that start with the younger generation, some things that the younger generation can teach or pass knowledge along to older generations? What's like the
Hey, I like to say something on this. I think the obvious ones are maybe the marketing strategy. I feel like they are very good at using social media platforms as in
social media? That's
TikTok.
what I was looking for. So thanks, Pooja.
Yeah,
Keep going.
TikTok, and now I feel like there's an app called Lemon and others as well. So yeah, they're very good at doing that. And I think we can learn some things as in marketing strategies like those as in social media platforms from them.
Awesome. Thank you. Anything else?
I would say that just building off of social media, I think technology as a whole, I think Gen Z can really drive innovation because, I mean, I'm a millennial. So for me, computing was kind of just starting to reach that peak internet and innovation stage. And we've evolved where Gen Z has probably had technology right from the beginning.
Yep.
So I find that in my collaborations with Gen Z so far on our side is I'm learning a lot about how we can innovate. And I'm a BA on the TMNAS side, one of the sister companies with
yay.
Billy. So hi, Kayla.
Hi, Robert.
So for us, like to help Philly or one of our other companies that we support, I'm finding that we're getting a lot of help and strategies in terms of innovating our products and the user interfaces that folks will interact with to kind of make things progress in our organization. So they're driving that.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. And on a personal note, I have an 8-year-old, and she can do things on my phone that I didn't even know were a thing. So even outside of the workplace, I am learning. I'm like, how did she know how to do that? I don't know if she picked it up on YouTube, or like you said, they're just born with this like ability to like swipe a screen and figure things out. So great example there. And then real quick, what are some things that older generations, so let's say like millennials and above, can pass along to younger generations? And Christiane, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I had one more for the younger generations.
Yes.
So some of the experience that I've had working with our summer associates, especially this past summer, I think that there is a lot more like focus in data and how data can be applied to problem solve as compared to when me, a millennial, was in college, because the concept of like gathering data, and of course this goes back to tech as well, but the concept of gathering data in this way that we can now, it's so much easier than it used to be. And so I think that people are like laying that over and utilizing it to problem solve in ways that we hadn't done before.
Yes, that is a great point. And yes, I do get to work with Christiane with certain aspects of the summer intern program, and we are always blown away by the innovative spirit of the students. So any points for benefits or knowledge sharing that older generations can pass to younger folks?
I'll take a shot at that. So sometimes less tech, more live, right? Connecting with folks, whether it's
Mhm.
on the phone, whether it's within the session, but having a face-to-face is important as well.
Absolutely. And then, like I said, there are just certain things that that you can only learn from experience, or sometimes you can see something like going the wrong way, and you can help people avoid making the mistakes you made, or avoiding certain pitfalls with professionalism, with dealing with certain kinds of accounts, or just reading a room. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on. So it may, and of course there's you know literal industry knowledge, like black and white stuff and information, but sometimes it's a lot of the context and the what we call character skills or soft skills that professionals who have been in the game, so to speak, for a while can fill people in on. That can save a lot of heartache and kind of learning things at a slower rate. Someone can be like, hey, let me just fill you in on a little something that you're not going to see in the employee manual or the company website. All right, so let us now move into, I mentioned stereotypes earlier, and I think it's very difficult to have a conversation about diversity or inclusion without mentioning stereotypes, because it is an issue across all areas of diversity. So generational stereotypes, in essence, are assumptions we make about people based on the era they were born in. And these stereotypes often highlight the differences between generations, which is helpful, but they become problematic when we overly rely on them, because we then miss the opportunity to really get to know someone, and we can unfairly judge individuals based on simply one characteristic of who they are, which is their age. So stereotyping, or kind of the trends we see, can be helpful, but there's a fine line between identifying common trends within a certain age group and then just making assumptions too quickly based on that one aspect of who someone is. So what are some stereotypes that you are aware of, that you might be aware of the generation you're in? So by now, even if you didn't know before, you should know now what generation you fall into. Are you aware of any stereotypes? And it can be positive or negative, of your actual generation. Doesn't mean you agree with them. You're just aware that they exist.
Yeah, I would say one for Gen Z and at least the younger demographic is like a lack of work ethic. I know a lot of people say like, oh, kids these days they don't want to work hard and they're not willing to do certain things. So
I love that you said kids these days, because that's exactly like how it always starts off. So yes, Travis, absolutely. That is one more of a negative stereotype, unfortunately, of Gen Z. What else? Can be any generation, even if it's not, how about this? Even if it's not your generation. So let's say your parents' generation, you're like, well, this is what I've heard or what I'm aware of.
I feel sometimes, the older generation and the professional setting, they think like everybody loves corporate jargons and hidden agendas, and they hate being transparent.
Okay, okay. Who's just like, I'm keeping it real today. Okay, yes. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, the corporate jargon can be, especially I think in the insurance industry, even me as someone who's, in their early 40s, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like, you got to speak in layman's terms. Awesome. All right, anyone else? One more?
I know for millennials coming out and coming into the workforce, it was, I'm going to enjoy my avocado toast while working and hitting a ping pong ball back and forth. Because that's all we heard about was we want ping pong tables and, coffee machines and things like that instead of the actual work.
And that might exist, I think, at like maybe a Google or something, but yeah, it's definitely not like your typical corporate environment. And I do remember when avocado toast became a thing. And
Mhm.
I personally, I'm just like, I can't pay $16 for avocado toast. So I can make it in my kitchen. But yes, it did blow up as like a dish. I think for our generation for sure. So thanks for sharing that, Robert. Yeah, so let's take a look at some common generational stereotypes that are out there. So thanks for the ones that you all shared. So what I have laid out here is four kind of well-known stereotypes, and the two in the top row for each age group or each generation are some of the more, I guess, negative sounding ones, and then the two lower ones are positive. I like to keep things balanced. So let's take a look at baby boomers. One stereotype out there is that they're workaholics, and this is a generation that prided themselves on being first in the office and the last to leave, and really not valuing or prioritizing work-life balance, which we could see a huge shift in today's younger workers. There's another stereotype that they are not tech savvy, and I can speak for baby boomers I know who are very tech savvy. So that is one where I'm like, this does not apply to all. And then some positives, they're very cooperative, tend to not rock the boat or complain a lot, and are very loyal. So you see a lot of folks in this generation that have worked for the company they're currently at since day one, and they've been there for 30 years, 35 years, and so on. And that was what you did back then. You got a job and you stayed there forever, which I'm sure has pros and cons, right? Then Gen X, some of the negative stereotypes out there: resistant to change, kind of like don't want things to be different, even if it might be for sake of an improvement. They tend to be cynical or have a glass half empty mentality. And then some positives: they're self-reliant, so very independent. And I think that comes from them being the first generation of what we call latchkey kids. So the Gen Z folks, do you know what that means, latchkey kid? You heard that term? No? Okay. So this was a generation where it was becoming more common for both parents in the household to have jobs. So there was no one at home when they got home from school. So they had a key and they would let themselves in, and they'd just be at home alone at like from probably age like 9, 10, 11. So they've grown up being more self-reliant. And then pragmatic, which very like practical thinkers and maybe not as emotionally driven as others, but it's like, this is what makes sense, this is logical, this is how we do things. Then we move on to millennials, which I remember being a younger when the term millennial first became very popular, and there was a strong stereotype that we're very entitled and expect the world to revolve around us and to get things we didn't earn. They say millennials change jobs often. So this is one of generations where I've even heard that people were encouraged and advised, like, you have to change jobs every 5 years. That's how you get ahead. That's one way to be successful. This is the first generation that was considered tech savvy because technology and the internet and all of that got popular, I guess, when we were probably middle school, high school age. So we remember life before the internet, but we're young enough to be very used to it at this point. And then they also, another positive stereotype, they want meaningful work. They want their work to align with their values and their morals. And then Gen Z. So first one here, does not want to wait to earn higher pay. So the stereotype out there, not Kayla's opinion, but the stereotype out there is that Gen Z wants to get a 6-figure job right off the gate, get promoted every year, and is like, what's taking so long? I'm awesome. I should be, killing it more at this point. Another stereotype is that they're not good at handling constructive feedback or criticism. And then some positives, they're concerned about social responsibility and will select an employer based on philanthropic efforts, environmental consciousness, and those sorts of things. And then, of course, we spoke about this already, are highly digital, which, of course, in today's modern world is an asset and is very important. All right. So here's the issue with overly relying on stereotypes. It can lead to biases that affect how people interact with their coworkers, which can then lead to exclusion, miscommunications, and unnecessary tension on teams. And some examples, let's say there's a manager who has a employee who's a baby boomer generation, and that manager just assumes off the bat this person isn't tech savvy and doesn't consider him or her for a project involving new technology. Or they might mistakenly judge a millennial worker or unfairly judge a millennial worker, thinking that they're not committed to their job because of the entitlement stereotype, and that could prevent certain opportunities from being offered to that individual. All right. And then one more point I want to make on this, and then we'll jump right into the communication aspect, is for each of the stereotypes, if you will, listed here, there's a spectrum. So if someone is considered a workaholic, for example, not everyone who might fall into that category is going to be exactly the same. So you could have a workaholic that's like extreme, and then one where you're like, you're towing the line, you're a little bit more balanced, but still more leaning toward workaholic. Let's look at can't handle criticism for Gen Z. There might be some folks who it's a struggle for them to get negative feedback, but they're working on it. They're aware of that. It's helpful. It's important. And then you might have the other extreme of someone who completely falls apart if you tell them they made a mistake. So everything here has a spectrum, and I think that is what also creates the diversity and the extent to which you see these traits show up within people, that are in the same age group. Any comments or questions before we move on? Okay, so next question for the group is, and you can share in the chat or use your mic, is what aspects of communication vary between generations? So for example, maybe it's mode of communication, vocabulary, like those sorts of things. What are the different ways that communication is different from one age group to the next? Okay, body language, absolutely. What else? Any other thoughts? When to use technology, how quickly people expect a response. Yes, Allison, we've talked about that. Being direct versus more circular communication or implying something, formality, especially with texting. These are amazing examples and very closely line up with the list I have. So you all are on it, like exactly what the differences are. So the list I have here is these 5 things. So the first one is the preferred method of communication, which is more of a tech angle. So from a tech standpoint, different generations tend to prefer different modes of communication between, texting, picking up the phone, speaking to someone in person, sending an email, and determining when to use what mode of communication for what message or conversation they want to have. So some folks from older generations may think, for example, texting to call out of work is unprofessional. I remember being in my 20s and that was not allowed. Like, you cannot send a text to call out. You have to pick up the phone. And I could see someone from a younger generation where texting is a lot more common, not seeing anything wrong with sending a text to, to say, I'm sick, I'm not coming into the office today. The next one is level of formality, which someone mentioned. So that speaks to the grammar that's used. And then if sending an email versus a text, some people have a different level of formality depending on the mode of communication that they're using. And even punctuation, I have heard, varies between the generations and how people start a message, or if they always start with a greeting and have to be like, hi, how are you today? And then go into what they're saying, or if they just get right to the point, hey, can you send me blah, blah, blah. Like, there's different opinions on how to write emails at work. Of course, vocabulary, references, lingo definitely vary from one age group to the next. And I try to be very thoughtful, especially in my role where I'm constantly presenting or facilitating a training class, on the references I use, because when I was growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, there's things that were very popular, very like everyone could relate to. And if I reference one of those things to a younger audience, they may not know what I'm talking about. So for example, a common like saying or like fun way to ask someone to share a little bit about themselves was to say, give me your VH1 behind the scenes. And for the people that are under 25, they probably are like, what is VH1? So you have to be aware of like, who am I talking to? Are they going to understand that reference? And I have certainly been in meetings where someone has referenced something and everyone laughs. The folks older than me laugh, and I'm like, I have no idea who that is. Is that like an athlete, a movie star? Like, never heard of them. So references can be tricky. Analogies, metaphors, emojis. I read a whole article on emojis and how they are used differently between millennials and Gen Z, and it was mind-blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that that's what that emoji represents when someone in their 20s uses it versus when I use it. So very, very cool stuff. Next thing on here is topics of conversation. So you are not always going to talk about work when you're with your coworkers or colleagues. And there's a difference in what people from older generations will talk about outside of work topics compared to people who are younger. I haven't seen anything fully conclusive on what those topics are, but I think in general, folks who are older tend to not bring up certain things that they consider to be very personal, like maybe seeing a therapist, whereas I have younger friends who talk about it all the time. Well, my therapist said this, and they're very open about certain things. And in older generations is like, whoa, you do not bring that up, or you don't talk to other people about that. So even knowing those differences can be helpful in the workplace setting, so that you maybe don't avoid you can avoid maybe awkward encounters, or just be aware. And then finally is the preferred source of information and news. So there are differences in how people gather their information and facts. So even though this may not be directly speaking to someone else, I think it's relevant to mention, because if you're communicating and you're speaking about current events or business, you have to realize that some people are getting their news from TikTok, from Instagram, from social media, and other folks are still reading the newspaper or watching the 6 o'clock news. And there might be differences in what information they're getting, how quickly they're getting that information, and then how their perception might be swayed by how others are reacting to the information. So I know for me, this is something, probably a younger person characteristic that I've adopted. When I see something on social media, before I decide how I feel about it, I read the comments to see how people are responding to it. And that gives me more context, or like a broader way of looking at something before making a decision or a judgment on how I feel about it. All right. So any thoughts on any of these that anyone wants to comment on, or you're like, yes, I can totally relate to that, or do you have a question?
Yeah, I have I have a lot of things to talk about. So, I am interning with a startup company right now, and I think most of the founders are Gen Z, and our mode of communication is not email, it is Discord.
What is that?
It's an app, so
Okay.
it's like a chatting app, but not totally a chatting app. It's like a professional app to chat with the members.
Awesome. See, so I never even heard of that. I know Ebony was like, what is that? And I don't pretend I know things. I'll be like, I've never heard of that. You have to fill me in. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on like vocabulary, formality, sources of information? And Ebony, I'm an older millennial. I'm right on the cusp. One more year, I would have been Gen X, or 2 more years. So I'm
Same
really,
here.
yeah.
But I know what this story is.
All right. So this is just a quick slide. In general, these are some general communication preferences that have been identified by generation. So baby boomers in general prefer auditory communication, so being on the phone. Gen X, they say, are more visual, so might be to me that would be like emails, text messages. Millennials definitely more likely to use text messages and instant messaging. And then Gen Z, whatever is the fastest, and emojis are what their preference is. So it could be all the above, but whatever will get them the information fastest, which I think I tend to agree with this for sure. All right, let's take a look at some data here on email styles by generation. I brought the ages backups in case you can't quite remember where the cutoff is for each generation. But take a moment to read through the descriptions here of how different generations communicate in email, and let us know if you agree or not.
So Kayla,
Yes.
I would disagree that Gen X emails are clear and iron out what the actual expectations are. I feel like sometimes, and this is, listen, I'm a proud millennial, but I kind of cross over into that Gen X, I'm a zennial at times, right? So I
Yes, yes.
have a little bit of both. But I feel like as I get further along in my career, those that are before me, it's almost as if you're supposed to know, as opposed to explaining what it is that they want me to know.
Okay.
And I do, like, that happens at work, that happens with my, like with my family, like personally. I find that the instructions aren't necessarily very clear, but it's like, oh, well, you should have known what I meant.
Right,
Like,
right.
no, I don't know what you meant. So that's probably the only thing that I would kind of challenge a little bit.
Okay, and I'm glad you shared that, Ebony, because I think this then supports the point that stereotyping doesn't always get it right. That there's going to be differences, and depending on where you are, your experiences, or even how you define what a clear instruction is. So a lot of this is very contextual and subjective. Yes, Christiane, for sure. It's like they give you just enough, you have to figure it out. I know as a millennial, I love a good bullet point in an email. If it's getting too long, I immediately default to using bullet points to make the message easier to follow and read. Yep. Robert said the same thing as I was saying it. Awesome. All right. So yeah, this was just kind of for fun. So what I want to get into now before we wrap up is looking at some examples or scenarios and helping you, especially the main audience here, the Gen Z, to make choices to vary your communication style in different settings, and in other words, read the room. And I jotted this down when Ken was doing the introduction. He said, this is a very relaxed environment, and then he said, AKA chill. So he kind of like switched over to the lingo. I'm hoping chill is still like the way to say that for Gen Z, but I clocked that, Ken. I was like, okay, look at Ken's doing the switch up.
You said clocked. You said clocked.
Yes. So this will help you to read the room. So let's look at the first one. Or let's look at this first. So a way to kind of break this down is, one, you want to identify your audience and your environment. Are you speaking to someone who is a manager or a leader, a certain level in the organization? Are you speaking to someone who is your peer, and for today's purposes, like same age group? Or is it an external customer? Because this could determine how you choose to communicate. And then what environment are you in? Is it a formal setting, like a really like corporate serious meeting where everyone's dressed up? Is it informal, like in the lunchroom or a networking event? Is it social versus business? And is it a planned conversation, or you kind of bump into someone and then you're like, oh gosh, like what do I do now? So let's look at the first scenario. And this is again directed at the Gen Z population. You are having a casual conversation with your peers at work, and everyone is using the current lingo, the Gen Z lingo. A coworker from an older generation joins your conversation. Would you make any changes to the lingo or vocabulary you are using? Why or why not? What are your thoughts? I mean, Gen Z, we want you to I'm sure others of us have our opinions, but we want to hear what you would do and why.
I think I will be communicating in full complete sentences rather than short forms.
Okay. And is your name, do I say Pooja?
Yeah, that's correct.
Awesome, thanks. So is that how you communicate in general, or would that be a switch you would make because of who you're now speaking to or who's part of the conversation?
Yeah, if it's someone professional from the older generation, then I would do that. I would switch my communication style.
Okay. And you would do that because you think it's more professional or more appropriate for that individual?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, both.
awesome. Thank you. Anyone else?
Looks like you have a comment in the chat from Brian.
Okay. Brian says, I would try to include them into the conversation by including context. Kind of like, see, I didn't know that TLDR. I've never seen that. Too long, didn't read to catch them up to speed. Okay, I like that. Yeah, so it's something to think about because I'm a firm believer that you should be your authentic self as much as possible, especially in the workplace. But I think everyone to some degree has a version of themselves in the workplace that's not exactly the same as who they are outside of work. So it's kind of striking that balance between, yes, I'm being authentic, but I'm also like in the 2 slides ago, reading the room, this person is not going to understand this reference or this this current lingo that me and my peers use. So it might be worth it. It might be a good idea to switch. But you know, I'm open to hearing any comments that say otherwise. There's no wrong or right answers here. So all right, let's look at the next one. Oh, one other point here before we move on. Depending on the context and how casual the conversation is, this could be an opportunity for the younger employees to define some things for the person that joined who's a little bit older, or like kind of educate them on something, again, if that's appropriate, if you think that's helpful. If not, then, you know, maybe switch it up a little bit. All right, next. Scenario 2. So again, Gen Z folks, you have a question for which you need an answer by the end of the day. And let's say it's like 10 a.m. in the morning, 10, 11 a.m. The best person to ask, the person who you know has the answer, is a manager in another department. What mode or modes of communication would you use to reach out to them, and why? You need a kind of an urgent answer, not like this minute, but, you know, semi-urgent. Where did Travis
I would
go?
say
Okay.
if I was in the
There he is.
same building, I'm still here. I'd say if I was in the same building or space as them, I would just go try to check in with them individually, especially if it's like just a quicker question, because I feel like it can almost be more work to email back and forth if it's something pretty simple.
Mhm. I think that's a great response. And I like how you added in, if we're in the same building, I would do this. Great. And sometimes it's so much quicker to just have a back and forth dialogue for 5 minutes, and you email them and then they email back, and then 2 hours later you have to clarify something. So I think that's a good answer. Anyone else? Oh, I see some stuff in the chat. Make the email high importance. Yep. And good point, Allison. Be careful that you don't routinely make your emails high importance, because then it's like crying wolf. And then when it really is high importance, everyone's like, well, all our emails come through that way. So it's the same difference. I am very, very selective with when I use that. I probably use it twice a year, so that when someone sees it, they're like, oh, I better read this. If it, you know, if for some reason it needs to be in an email because you have to attach something or whatever, or forward an email from someone else for context, sometimes the email is going to be best, even though I agree, if you need it urgently, pick up the phone or talk to them in person if you're in the same space. Stephen says, email initially, follow up with a Teams chat a few hours later. And thank you, Stephen, for saying a few hours later, because I think both Allison and I have been on the receiving end of the email with the Teams chat 10 seconds after the email. And we're like, wow, a lot going on. So don't do that. Yeah, so some good answers here. And as you can see, there's multiple ways to do this. It's not like there's one right way. Let me see if I missed anything. Robert says, depends on the individual. If you have an established rapport, I love how you all are adding context, because it really does depend. We discuss, if an urgent matter comes up, what's the quickest way to get a hold of them. That's an excellent approach as well. Yeah, I'm probably what if you're like Kayla, pick one, I would pick up the phone unless they were in the same office. And I do the pop in, lean in through the door. Hey, quick question. And again, if it's someone I'm super familiar with, I wouldn't do that to the CEO. I'm not just gonna walk up to the CEO's office and be like, hey, I have a question. Okay. All right, we got one more scenario. You end up next to a senior executive while waiting for an elevator. You both recognize each other and say hello. What will you talk about with her? Yes, I made her a her, the CEO a she. What would you talk about with her for the next 2 minutes? So you didn't have time to plan this. You don't have time to sit down and think, what did I learn in that course on communication? You're just in the moment. What do you think would be a good idea to talk about for 2 minutes with a senior executive that you probably don't get to talk to one-on-one very often, and you want to make the most of it? The weather. That's always a good place to start, especially if you live in the Northeast where weather is like its own event. It's cold one day, hot one day, and then we're gonna have the worst snow we've ever had in 5 years. They say that every year, I think just to like get people stirred up. But yeah, weather is a safe topic. What else? Because if you walk away from that conversation and all you did was talk about the forecast, you're probably going to be like, darn it, like I could have made more of that encounter. Has anyone ever heard of like an elevator speech or like had a formal class on like when you're networking, like the things to talk about in short, like 2-minute spurts? Have you done that in school? Yeah, so this would be your time. Hopefully, if you can stay composed and focused, is yep, recent company news that shows that you know what's going on, or just find a way to talk about something you're working on that you're proud of, that this person is probably not on their radar. Like, oh, so nice to run into you. I've been busy working on XYZ and it's going well because of this. Like, find a way to subtly and professionally maybe, promote something that you're doing, but not in like an annoying or over the top way, which again is open to interpretation. I like that too, Ebony. Sometimes just talking about like current, or if there's something you know about them, like how are your kids doing, or I saw you just came back from a trip or had a big an award that we got, something like that, and ask about something to do with them. Yeah, so there's like a long list of things, and this would be something that maybe you prepare for a little bit, so if and when it happens, you're kind of ready to have that impromptu conversation. I would then go into what we shouldn't talk about, but I want to make sure we have time to close, so we're going to move on to our last couple of slides here. So I just want to wrap up today by saying, we definitely spent some time highlighting the benefits of multi-generational workplaces and some of the differences as it relates to communication and how to navigate that successfully. But at the end of the day, we often have so much in common with people who are different than us. And I just wanted to kind of end with this reminder that, especially in a workplace setting, if you've been called to kind of work in the same industry or at the same organization, there are quite a few things you're going to have in common with people, no matter how old they are, which is to be heard and valued at work. Everyone wants that. Everyone wants to be in a position to learn and to grow as professionally. Everyone wants to do meaningful and purposeful work and feel like they're contributing to a larger picture and that what they're doing is helping others. We all want strong relationships with our colleagues. We want some level of autonomy and control and agency in our roles. And then, of course, to feel respected and highly regarded and feel that we belong. So that is a session for today. Thank you all so much for your time and participation. I really enjoyed it. So I hope it was a good use of your time. And I'm going to pass it back to Ken.
Awesome. It was a great use of time. You did a fabulous job. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience with the group. Of the mindset that a couple of key takeaways that kind of resonated with me personally. One was generally flexibility about approach, just appreciating the dynamics of different generations and how to interact to kind of generate strong relationships with one another. Second, kind of came up about when ideas are challenged, you get to better problem solving. I think the example at the beginning, I think it was Robert talked about product innovation and Christiane talked about data strategically. I thought that those were really good points as well. And then towards your last couple slides, you talked about find out what we have in common, which for Bree and me and Megan and Danny and Maya and Spencer generally is about student impact and positive impact. So you make a positive impact on Next Gen Talent by being here and sharing your expertise, and really appreciate you taking the time to do it. So with that being said, just a couple quick final comments. Thank you to Philly. Obviously, thank you to Kayla for taking the time to support our virtual campus. This is our last for 2025. We will gear up for 2026. Towards the beginning of the year, you'll have a variety of folks that are on our website, so you can navigate to that and register in real time. But take some time during the holidays to re-energize and get ready for 2026. Enjoy the balance of the year, and thank you again for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Enjoy
Thank
the
you,
rest of your day.
everyone. And thanks, Allison, Nicole, Robert, Christiane, Ebony, all my colleagues for joining. It's always nice to have familiar people around. So I really appreciate you guys being here.
Absolutely. Well said. Us too. Sounds good. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.